When discussing game design, it's common to focus on the explicit systems that a user interacts with. Topics such as the game's enemies, the explosions, weapons, missions, environments, and the game's story are usually the main points of discussion. In itself, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. However, game design isn't just about fleshing out each one of those individual systems. A good game also needs to focus on the forms of interaction between the systems, while constructing a coherent design. A game's design is coherent when it links its various elements and systems via a common theme. If each system adds to each other, the player's net experience will be greater than the sum of its parts. My goal then with this video is to exemplify how designers have used numerous mechanisms to construct coherent games. Let's take a simple example of coherence in Diablo 3. When discussing about Diablo 3, fans often talk about its characters, its loot system, the auction house, and so on. However, what about its potion system? I'm not referring to the potions in the game, how you can buy and sell potions. I mean the actual system of simply drinking a potion to recover health. That system in itself seems simple. The user presses a dedicated button, which causes their character to drink a potion, thus regaining health. Contrast this with Diablo's 2 design, where to quickly drink potions, the user had to leverage the belt inventory space. Although it might not seem much, the presence of a dedicated button for potion consumption versus handling a limited inventory space for potions fundamentally changes not only the game's combat design, but also its character design. In Diablo 3, since players can easily access more potions than Diablo 2, the game's design adapted to incorporate a potion cooldown system. After drinking a potion, players can't drink another one for a limited amount of time. If that cooldown wasn't present, combat would not be balanced, because players would have access to an endless supply of health. But the cooldown has a side effect. It makes the players vulnerable since they can't recover health in that time period. To balance that, the game introduces players to abilities such as slowing enemies down, jumping around them, as well as constructing traps. All of this serves as mechanisms for players to gain time, which is what they need for the cooldown system to wear off. The character's ability system then coherently combines with the potion consumption system, since one is made to overcome the limitations of the other. However, other games have extended the concept of coherence to entire new levels. Let's take a design deep dive on how Dishonored did that with its own potion system. Similarly to Diablo 3, Dishonored also has a dedicated button for drinking potions. The red potion restores the player's health, while the blue potion restores the player's mana. However, Dishonored also introduces to the player the characters that invented these potions in the game's lore. Sokolov, a drunken womanizer, created a health potion, while Piero, a scholarly academic, created a mana potion. The attribution of these characters to these items creates a thematic coherence between the game's mechanics and its lore. Sokolov is obsessed with vivisections. His ambition to study physiology has even led him to perform tests on imprisoned individuals. Meanwhile, Piero is a scientist and philosopher by nature, constantly exercising his mind to explore new ventures. From a lore point of view, it makes sense to have Sokolov attributed to the health potion, while Piero is attributed to the mana potion. Not only that, Dishonored then takes a step forward with coherence and ties its potion mechanics with the game's overarching plot. The game's story highlights that those two potions can also be used to help prevent contamination from a plague that's currently infesting the city. An infected individual will eventually turn into a Weeper, a zombie-like enemy that the player has to face. When a Weeper attacks the player, causing damage, the player may then use a potion to recover health. Let's take a step back here and analyze what was just discussed. The potions really do help prevent the Weeper conditions, not just from the story perspective, that is what the game told you, but with actual game mechanics the player experiences. So right now we have established the coherence in characters, potion, plague, Weeper, and health mechanics. But Dishonored keeps raising the coherence bar. If the player kills too many characters in the game will begin to present more and more Weepers for the player to tackle in subsequent stages. This clever design trick proposes coherence in two ways at the same time. The first one is with the consequences of the player's actions being tied with the game's plot. As the player creates more corpses to litter the streets, the faster the plague spreads. The second mechanism is with the overall theme of a sandbox stealth-based game. The player may traverse the levels and solve puzzles in a myriad of ways. If the player chooses a stealth style to avoid enemies, as opposed to killing them, and invests in stealth abilities, the player will then have to deal with less weepers. Less weepers means more possibilities to play stealthily. However, if the player chooses an aggressive style, by killing enemies and investing in hostile abilities, the player will have more weepers to confront during missions. More weepers means more possibilities to play aggressively. The contrast of stealth versus aggressive mechanics gives players the choice in how to play the game. The game then adapts to the player's playstyle while tying those changes with the game's weeper lore, a design consistency with player's playstyle and game plot. Lastly, in the final act of the game, depending on how the player played it, Sokolov and Piero may unite forces to create a cure for the plague, thus coming full circle with the game's overall theme, as well as with its subsequent systems. In short, Dishonored coherently ties every system and lore in its universe. Now let's take a look at another game that presented unique ways of coherence as well, The Last of Us. The one common theme in The Last of Us is of scarcity. In a world gone wrong, we have scarcity of tools, resources, but also affection and support. This leads the game to ask a simple question: what is important to you? When you have scarce resources, you are forced to make a decision on what really matters to you. What's clever about The Last of Us is that it asks this question in various ways, all coherently tied. The main one, subject to a lot of discussion in the gaming community, is of Joe's choice to lie to Ellie. Joe is confronted with the question of what is important to you, and answers it. Saving Ellie is important to him, even if it means dooming the world. The game also asks this question to another character, Henry, to which he answers that his brother Sam is what is important to him. In essence, the game is asking this question to every character in the game. What The Last of Us brilliantly does is to present the question of importance, not just to the characters in the game, but to the player as well via its mechanics. The game possesses an item construction system in which one can build tools out of scavenged parts. Since the player rarely has enough resources to build all the tools they need, the player must answer the question: what tool is important to build? What is important to me? Consequently, the player must also answer the question: what playstyle is important to me? Should the player build bombs to fight off enemies? Should the player use shivs to pick locks? Or should the player use those same shivs to fight off an enemy? The same way the characters have to deal with a world struck with scarcity, so does the player, via a mechanic that's coherently tied with its plot and game setting. A similar form of mechanics and lore is presented in the game's weapon upgrade system. Since the player won't be able to upgrade all their weapons, they'll have to choose which ones they'd like to focus on. Since different weapons propose different playstyles, this mechanics also forces players to choose how they wish to experience the game. Similarly to Diablo 3, scarcity of resources is also present in the buttons the player has to use to quickly switch weapons. The player may select their weapon of choice with the D-pad triggers and can quickly switch amongst them mid-battle. However, if they want to pick another item that's not in the D-pad, they have to sit back and scroll through another item menu. It's as if they had to look through their backpacks and pick up the items they currently don't have easy to use. This system elegantly adheres to the combat system as well, since players are now vulnerable to enemy attacks while perusing their backpacks. In essence, this scarcity of quick weapon selection forces the player to answer the question: what weapons are important for you to use? What is important to you? The game's title also represents the concept of scarcity as well, because when it states "the last of us," it means there used to be a group of people, and now we're the ones left. Humanity as a group and as a concept is a scarce resource in the game. All of this symbolized by the game's title. The game also addresses the concept of scarcity via its soundtrack as well. In music theory, there's a concept called leitmotif, which could be considered a recurring theme in a music composition. Think of it as the identity of a song, what makes a song recognizable. In various soundtracks in The Last of Us, you notice the presence of ambient sound with only a few notes playing. Here's a few examples. It's as if the music composer had scarcity of notes to use and had to answer the question, what sounds are important to you? The Last of Us displays that a common theme can be present amongst its various set of systems and experiences, all helping construct a more powerful experience to the user. If none of this coherence discussion seems important to you, think of the following game called the Green Shock of Power. In it, the player must build a shelter for children by burning down orphanages in a nearby village. From the wreckage of the buildings, you collect resources to build a new shelter. Or how about this game called the Green Shock of Power 2, where you help a war-traumatized individual escape a hospital by killing thousands upon thousands of human soldiers. Later on in the game, this traumatized individual will even help you fight the onslaught of soldiers. At the end of the game, both you and the character celebrate that everything is now okay for everyone. To be honest, the games I just mentioned might actually be fun to play. But the point I'm trying to make is that although coherence and design might not solve the problems of a fundamentally broken game, it can greatly enhance the experience of a good one. That's the case for both Dishonored and The Last of Us. Both of these games display how to construct coherence in game design via its mechanics, lore, plot, and even sound design. When analyzed from that perspective, it's no wonder why these two games, which were completely new franchises when launched, were met with almost universal critical acclaim. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I'd love to hear your feedback, so feel free to shoot me an email at daltreedawaters@gmail.com. Like and subscribe as well if you liked it. Also, visit my website www.versus-software.com for more analyses such as this one. Thanks for watching. Until then, cheers.